All right, everybody, it's that time of the day, my friends. It's time for Football at 4. Of course, it is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Geoff Mosher, Adam Kaplan bring you the Inside the Birds podcast. It dropped this morning. The latest edition is out. And Geoff Mosher, the latest edition is out. We are getting closer to Eagles training camp. The clock is ticking. The sand is going through the hourglass, and we are starting to feel football. Like when that calendar creeps up to the end of July, you know training camp is about to get here. And we got a lot to dive into as the Eagles training camp is almost here. What's going on, man?
Hey, what's going on? Yeah, it's like that time where you can say, training camp is this month. So that's how you know it's real. When the calendar turns to July, and even though training camp's a little later this year and different, it's still now within kind of arm's reach.
It is. And, one of the things that has been interesting that we've been kind of tracking, we talked about a little earlier in the show, ESPN.com did a whole thing where they've been asking over 50 executives and scouts and players to kind of get their input on the different talent at each position. And this weekend, they did the interior offensive line and they did the offensive tackles. And I was wondering when we were starting this, because they've done the corners, Darius Slay was number 9. So still pretty well respected around the league. Darius Slay is the 9th ranked corner entering this season. They also had Fletcher Cox as the number 5 ranked defensive tackle. And the interesting part about all that, Moshe, is on the defensive side of the ball, inside the division, those are 2 of the highest ranked players in the entire division. It seems that defense is going to be, now Chase Young was number 7 at defensive end, but they didn't have another guy on their defense ranked in the top 10. Philadelphia was the only one that had 2 ranked in the top 10. And then, well, I'll let you comment on that first. Darius Slay, number 9. So I think a lot of people thought he had a down year last year. His peers obviously did not.
I was just about to joke with you because I think last time I was on with you, we were talking about Darius Slay's PFF ranking being somewhere in the 50. Didn't you tell me Steven Nelson was ranked higher than Darius Slay on PFF?
Yep.
So who do you believe? I mean, I like PFF a lot for certain metrics and standards, but then sometimes they come out with stuff that, to me, I don't know where they got it from. So I don't think Darius Slay had a bad year last year. I think he struggled against certain types of receivers, Metcalf, Adams, Claypool, who are taller, more physical. And on many of those plays, he was there, just didn't make the play. Claypool got him pretty badly a couple of times, and he had to force the holding on him. But I think Slay is a good cornerback. I don't think I saw anything last year that made me think he's in such decline that going into this year that you're worried about his spot along with the spot opposite him.
Well, this is what the scouts said, all right? One NFC coach said when he's high motor, he's dangerous. When something goes wrong or if he's in a funk, he can be a liability. So would you look at it in that, things aren't going well and therefore I don't care? Like, I don't know that it was lack of effort.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, you could look at the Seattle game last year and the Green Bay game last year and say things were not going well for both of those, both him and for the defense and for the team altogether. And certainly he was targeted a lot because he wound up being matched up in man coverage against, 2 of the better, not just receivers, but guys who are high volume pass catchers in Adams and Metcalf. And so if things aren't going well and you're struggling, I don't think that he became a victim of falling into a lapse of we're struggling. I think he was just picked on by a really good quarterback and a really good wide receiver combination that felt it could match up well that day.
The other quote that came from a AFC scout said, Philly didn't exactly help him last year. They put him on an island, and he probably didn't have enough support. I think we can agree that they weren't good enough, but one of those things like Nnamdi Asomugha was great in Oakland. No one ever threw at him. What support was he not getting? Why didn't they use him well enough? And do we anticipate that this coaching staff will look at his strengths and utilize them? Did Jim Schwartz not use him the right way? Because when Asomugha got here, they obviously didn't use him the right way.
Yeah, I don't know if that they didn't use him the right way because they brought him in to be a man coverage corner that they haven't had, quite a while. And I would still say overall, although those bad moments seem to overshadow the good ones, he did play well against guys who have given the Eagles problems before, like Terry McLaurin. I know Slayton had a good game. One of the 2 Giants games, Slayton did well. The other one, not as much. I mean, you can go through the list of teams the Eagles played last year, and find some pretty good receivers he was matched up against who did not have a field day. I just feel like the three guys I mentioned, Claypool, Devontae Adams, and Metcalf, really got him, and the whole season sucked in general. So it's easy to just throw him into the pot and say this guy's not that good anymore. But I still think he's very competitive. He's got a lot of pride. I do think he goes out there and he fights hard. And as you just mentioned, Mike, the expectation with this new defense is that you're going to see more cover two looks, not completely cover two. It's not going to be the Indianapolis Colts, Tampa 2, Matt Eberflus defense, but you will see more protection for the cornerbacks with that safety play and just different disguises, different things to try to make a quarterback confused. That's another thing about not helping Darius Slay last year. It might not just be with personnel, but it might have been your scheme, a predictable scheme where the quarterback knew where he could go with the ball right from the snap.
Geoff Mosher, Football at 4. Let's go to Fletcher Cox. He was the number 5 defensive tackle, and an NFC scout said a little bit on the descent, but you know where he is at all times. He still tops on the scouting report when you prepare for Philly's defense. There was a time not too long ago when he was number 2 among interior D linemen, and you wouldn't look back. So I guess the question I have is, he still tops on the scouting report when you prepare for Philly's defense. Is that a good thing, that he's still their top player?
That's a great question. I'm curious before I answer more, because you said Washington's only top 10 player was Chase Young. Where does correct?
He was the number 7 edge rusher.
7 edge rusher. For interior tackles, then, where do they have Payne and where do they have Allen, the two tackles for Washington?
I will I'm see, look how fast I got that up here. All right, so I could give it to you real fast. 1 was Donald, 2 was Chris Jones, 3 DeForest Buckner, 4 Cam Hayward, 5 Fletcher Cox, 6 Jeffrey Simmons, 7 Leonard Williams from the Giants, 8 Stephen Tuitt, Pittsburgh, 9 Vita Vea, Tampa Bay, number 10 Grady Jarrett, Atlanta. Washington had Jonathan Allen listed as a other honorable mention.
Well, I disagree a little bit with these rankings. First of all, I think Grady Jarrett is better than the 10th ranking that he said. I think those 2 Washington tackles are really good. I think Payne, especially when healthy, is exceptionally good. And I guess sometimes you asked if it's a good thing that Fletcher Cox is still the best Eagles defensive lineman, given that he's older and not what he used to be. The thing about that ranking, Mike, is that it's kind of, to me, that seems to be a ranking based more on collective career than just last year, because there are some guys who had, like Jeffrey Simmons was incredible last year, I thought. So he had a really good year. And then there were a couple of names you mentioned that I thought, that guy didn't, like Fletcher Cox, maybe who didn't belong up there. So it'll be interesting to see after this year if this gets regrouped and where the names go. I don't think it's necessarily a forecast type of ranking. I think it's more of a what you've done collectively type of ranking, and Fletcher Cox does remain, up there with some of the best.
Yes, and the other comment from a NFC executive added that he's still a problem to me. He was on a bad defense. How much of this is like Slay and Fletcher Cox, that their talents were somewhat suppressed by the fact that they didn't have a lot of talent around them? Although, the Eagles' defensive line, Brandon Graham, Hargrave, they're pretty good players.
Weren't the Eagles one of the better sack teams last year? If I go back,
they were 1 or 2.
Yeah, so that goes to show you, and I've been trying to say this in many different ways, that you can get a lot of sacks and be a good tenacious defense like that. It doesn't mean you're going to be a great defense. Ordinarily, they go hand in hand. But with last year and the year before, we've talked about this with Jim Schwartz's scheme, it was always a sack-heavy type of defense. But by the same token, it seemed like when you matched up against some really good, smart quarterbacks, of which there are many in this league, they kind of knew it's a front four rush. It's a front four rush. There are certain pockets of this defense that I can pick apart and know that I can get to it before the rush gets to me, before the ball is even snapped. This year's defense is expected to look a lot different.
Yep.
Supposed to confuse the quarterback a little bit more. We will see if that actually happens. I still think that personnel wins in the NFL. I think most people do. Scheme helps. Personnel wins. And when you look at the Eagles from the linebacker to the safety level, the personnel doesn't measure up compared to the other guys. Oh, Leonard Williams, by the way, you didn't. That's the one. That's why I said this must not be a list based on last year, because honestly, Leonard Williams had a better year last year than Fletcher Cox. I don't think that's even an argument.
He was number 7 on the list, by the way.
He was number what?
7.
7. Yeah, so he was ranked below Fletcher. That's why I say it's more of a collective ranking than it is maybe more recent.
Yeah, in fact, well, it's funny, too, because they asked like 50 guys or so, and Williams' highest ranking of those 50 surveyors was number 4, and Fletcher Cox was number 3. His lowest ranking was number 12, and I guess he averaged out to be number 5. So you asked all 50 people, and he still had a higher ranking. Now, Williams, a Pro Bowl defensive player. So it was scouts, players, executive, coaches, says he doesn't know what he can be yet. Added an NFC scout. That combination of size and athleticism is just rare. An NFC scout also went on to say talented. He just doesn't put it together consistently. And so it sounds like consistency might be an issue for Williams.
Well, and that's fair. I mean, not last year, but certainly leading up to last year, consistency was an issue. But now that we mention all these guys, the NFC East may suck at a lot of things, but I would say find me a better division with better group of interior defensive tackles than the NFC East.
I will say on the defensive side of the ball, Dallas had almost no entries in any form, not honorable mention anywhere. The one spot now, I will say, obviously Philadelphia did not have a off-ball linebacker. They also had no safety that was mentioned, and really the whole division was devoid of a mentions in the top 10. There were some honorable mentions at some of those spots. But where I want to go to now is over to the offensive side of the ball. Over the weekend, Geoff, they did offensive tackles. And I was wondering whether Lane Johnson was going to fall on this list. In the top 10, he was just outside. He did get an honorable mention, though, as still one of the best tackles in football. And a lot of these evaluators suggest they think he's going to come back. He's one of the most athletic offensive tackles in football, and that he should bounce back from this injury.
That's kind of an out of sight, out of mind type of ranking. He, missed almost all of last year, so now he's not in the top 10. But when has Lane Johnson, when healthy and on the field, not played like a top 5 right tackle in the league? So the fact that he's not even in the top 10 just goes to show you that, it's a ranking put together by experts, sure, but they have the same kind of human nature biases and tendencies as we all do. It's like Hall of Fame voting. Everybody says, oh, the writers are this, the writers are that. The human beings are the same. We're all the same. We all have innate biases and tendencies, and we all tend to gravitate toward what just happened yesterday as opposed to like the collective career,
Yeah. Well, we know that he was hurt last year, and what was mentioned by an AFC executive is that he is still one of the most athletically gifted tackles in football. I expect him to bounce back from injury. And we've talked a lot about this offensive line. The Eagles had 3 linemen get mentioned. The other 2, Brandon Brooks, who did not play a snap last year, and an AFC exec, Mo said, should be high on the list. I think he's just easily forgotten about because of the injuries. So it sounds like people expect him to jump right back in at right guard and be one of the best players at that position.
I'm not surprised that people expect that, especially when the guy's been putting out videos of himself and he looks like an Adonis
What is he, Ben Simmons now?
Yeah, Ben Simmons, except an elite at his position. So I think it's fair to expect that he's going to be. I mean, look, anything can happen. I've talked to a few people around the league about this. Just when do you give a player the benefit of the doubt because he's done it before, and when do you say, well, this is now 2 injuries similarly, and that you just don't continue to bounce back and be who you are, no matter how hard you try. So there are some people in between. It is kind of a guessing game, but I do think, given his history, you give him at least the benefit of the doubt to start off with, that he's going to be, if not great, at least very good.
Yeah, and then obviously the third guy on that list, I was a little surprised that Jason Kelce got honorable mention. This is all interior linemen. It's not just centers. This includes guards as well, and yet Jason Kelce's still well-respected. It does say still love the player, but he's approaching the end. That's from an AFC scout. But it kind of shows that he's still one of the better guys, and you might have those 3 guys playing next to each other, and you wonder what that does for the offense.
No, it should do a lot. I mean, if these guys stay healthy, the one thing you can say is if they stay healthy, they should have no issues, and that should just mean that we get a really good indicator or barometer of how good the quarterback is going to be, because he shouldn't be under duress every single snap. He shouldn't be running for his life all the time unless that's something he forces upon himself. He should have enough protection, enough times to make the plays that the coaching staff wants him to make. And I also would be pretty happy if I'm Miles Sanders, because he had a pretty good year last year, in my estimation. I know a lot of people were upset with it, but I took a deep dive into the tape and the numbers. I've talked with Greg Cosell. He mentioned it too. He ran hard. He had some explosive play. He had 4 or 5 runs of over 40 or 50 yards. Now imagine that with your real offensive line in front of you all the time. I think that he stands to benefit, considerably.
Yeah.
With a
now let me
with an
ask you,
offensive
because
line
they're doing running backs tomorrow. Do you think he will be? I don't think he'll be in the top 10. Do you think he'll get an honorable mention?
No, I don't think so. He just doesn't have the. Go look at his numbers against some of the better defenses last year that the Eagles played. They're really good. And people will say, yeah, but that's because he had these one long runs. Well, they count. They matter.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look,
those are important.
just from I had him as a running back on my fantasy team, and he was like the master of these 85-plus yard runs. He had like 3 or 4 of them. Obviously just not consistent. And I think we could both agree, I don't love the way that Peterson used him.
Yeah, I don't. And listen, I think you can just take the whole offense as a whole last year and say part of there's responsibility on the player, there is a responsibility from the coaching staff, and then the injuries and the dysfunction and the quarterback play made it bad for everybody. For example, Miles Sanders caught passes 2 years ago as a rookie that nobody knew he could do because he didn't do it at Penn State. He showed really good hands. Last year, he dropped some balls that were, some a little bit low, but I mean, you should have caught them. There are also ones that he couldn't have caught that I felt like he got blamed for. But I feel like he got sucked into the just dysfunction of the offense last year.
I agree with that. A couple other things. They're not going to have a wide receiver. We know but I'm interested to see if Goddard and Ertz both make the top 10 or both make, the list in general, whether they get honorable mention or not.
I'm interested to see that too. It'll kind of give you an idea of what the league thinks of Zach Ertz. Goddard, I would expect that's a good one. There's a lot of good tight ends out there, and I don't think he's going to crack the top 5 based on his resume, and probably not the top 7. I'd have to go through my head right now who I think the last 5 of the top 10 tight ends are, and see where Goddard fits into that. Well, I don't think Ertz will make it.
That list is coming out on Thursday, so we'll take a look at that. And then, of course, the quarterbacks came out today, and obviously Jalen Hurts did not make that list as the top 10. It was Mahomes, Rodgers, Brady, Russell Wilson, Josh Allen, Matt Stafford, Dak Prescott, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, Kyler Murray, number 10, and then receiving votes was Matt Ryan, Derek Carr, Ben Roethlisberger, Ryan Tannehill, a lot of different guys. But Carson Wentz did make the honorable mention list, Geoff Mosher. He says, quote, the culture in Indy with Chris Ballard, Frank Reich, completely different vibe there compared to Philly. Don't care about how well you play week to week. They are feeding the consistency. Good line and running game will be absolutely perfect for Carson. That's from a veteran offensive player who said that. So people around the league still think that there's something to be gotten from him.
Yeah, and my thought from the beginning has been if they're trying to rebuild Carson Wentz and he's not a finished product by week 1, that's okay because they have such an excellent running game and offensive line that they could kind of probably, as long as Carson doesn't make terrible mistakes, which he's been prone to do sometimes, but if they can just kind of manage him and have him, play smart third down situational football while they kind of rebuild him, they'll be in good shape because there's more than one way to skin a cat for that team. They've got other weapons.
Hey, don't forget, by the way, tomorrow, Andrew DeCecco, Football at 4, will continue our division previews, which have been going great. We're going to do NFC this week. He'll be on the West and the South this week on Tuesday and Friday, and then we'll finish up with the North and the East next week with Andrew. But one thing that we talked about with Adam on Thursdays, and he brought up the conversation with Greg Cosell, who mentioned Fulgham. He said he's a big kid, runs well. I thought he showed good cutting ability. So he was saying that can't comment on what happened off the field, practice habits, yada, yada. But what I saw, my question for you, Moshe, is what if Fulgham is the player that you got for 4 games? What if that's the guy production-wise you're getting? Like, what does that mean for this offense to have that Travis Fulgham, Devonta Smith, Rieger, Goddard, Sanders, this offensive line? Like, is that something that is not being considered because of the way You know, he had 26 targets over 4 weeks. He had 9 the rest of the year.
I know it's last year should be like put in some kind of time capsule where we all get to go back to it in 10, 15, 20 years and think about all the crazy and odd things that happened. And that would certainly be one of them. That almost kind of became an afterthought by the end of the year. Look, what it would do for the offense is give it a diversity that right now I think it lacks at the receiving core. I think, Devontae Smith, I expect him to be a good player. Jalen Reagor, I expect him to be what they wanted, a fast, explosive, run after the catch type player. But neither of those guys, nor any of the others, kind of that tall, more physical, contested catch. I would say Devontae Smith was a good contested catch in receiver. In college, despite his frame. But Fulgham gives you the better combination of anybody on the receiving core of size, speed, catch radius, contested catchability. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be the best receiver of them all, but what I'm saying is Jalen Hurts may need a few times where he just throws the ball up. It's kind of like Carson did to Travis Fulgham on his big play against San Francisco, or the coming out play for Travis Fulgham, where you got to throw the ball up and hope your receiver makes a play. And to me, the guy who has that kind of ability, right, more so than any of them, is Travis Fulgham.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what kind of production they get from Travis Fulgham this year. I was just talking about this the other day. What if he actually is the player we saw in that 4 weeks? What if he produces like that type of guy? And then you have Smith, and I'm very intrigued by what Reagor might bring to the table. And then we talked about Goddard. We still don't have any idea what will happen with Zach Ertz, but that offensive line, we've been kind of harping on that all offseason long. This is going to be interesting. The training camp for the Philadelphia Eagles, not this Tuesday, not next Tuesday. The following Tuesday is when Eagles camp begins, and we will, of course, will be all over it for Football at 4, the Inside the Birds podcast. What do you guys got coming up the rest of this week? I know today you had a good one drop with a lot of the training camp battles. You've got a great week on all your platforms, but people got to start getting back in that routine every day now.
I know. We did a whole podcast dedicated to Ranger Suarez. No, I'm just kidding. We did our on Monday today. What dropped was our offensive training camp battle. It's a 2-part podcast series. We did offensive battles in this latest one, which of course is left tackle, number 2 running back, backup tight end, fourth and fifth receiver, and then on Thursday morning, our podcast next one will focus on the defensive battles at training camp, specifically at linebacker, third D tackle, third pass rusher, things like that, second corner right now, which is going to be a major competition unless they upgrade it.
All right, that's over at the Inside the Birds platform. And, of course, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Geoff will be back on Wednesday. Adam on Thursday. And Andrew will be here on Tuesday and Friday. We'll continue the division previews with him. He's been doing a great job. A lot of depth on all these teams. We're giving you a little insight on every team inside each division leading up to the NFC East. And then we will kick off Eagles training camp on the 27th. All right, Moshe, we look forward to training camp and all the coverage this year. And, of course, he, like all guests here on the Sports Bash, brought to you by Matt Blatt Kia. Matt Blatt, 6211 Black Horse Pike in Egg Harbor Township. All right, Moshe, have a good one, bud.
All right, take care.